Hello and welcome to the AI Digest. My name is Joaquin and I'm your host. With me today is the famous Alan Morrison, co founder of the Data Worthy Collective. Alan, it's a pleasure to have you here. Uh, we're on the different ends of the United States, but we're together in spirit.
We are. We are melding our minds as we speak here, and it's great to be with you, Joaquin.
Alan, you've had a long and fruitful career in just data collection, data analysis, data forecasting, its impact in business. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and where you sort of got your feet wet with data?
Well, it really is a broad-ranging background. I'm somebody who's curious about a lot of things, and the Data Worthy Collective, for example, is a group of people who are curious about the broader aspects of AI, for example. So, it basically is an extension of my own interest, and I started out collecting intelligence in the Navy, monitoring voice traffic in Russian, and I really got addicted to just um, finding out things and reporting on them. So that's what I did in intelligence, and I ended up becoming an analyst in the semiconductor industry after I left the Navy and I moved out to California. Got married here, and so I got into the chip industry doing market analysis after I got my MBA. And so we were doing these big forecasts of chip demand, and we'd have to take these systems apart, the systems that were coming together for wireless communications at that point. So satellite systems, cellular systems, and that kind of thing. And then, forecast demand for them. So you'd have to look at the marketplace and subscriber growth in the cellular area, for example, and forecast that demand and then quantify what kind of chip demand there was going to be based on how many sockets were going to be available for certain kinds of chips. And so that was a really fun job. I got to learn a lot about the chip industry. And PwC ended up hiring me for their R&D unit because I knew a lot about wireless systems initially. But it was a broad-ranging research group that did a lot of publishing. So I was on the publication side working with engineers and developers, but we're really just tracking the enterprise software market for the most part. We did have reports that we did on the semiconductors and other hardware, but really the focus was on software. So I got immersed in the entire enterprise software landscape. We were covering soup to nuts to try to find out, you know, where's the change? What's the impact going to be? What can we tell our clients is going to probably happen within 3 to 5 years? And we kept going back to um, the science fiction writer William Gibson, and the future's here. It's just less evenly distributed. So, as an R&D group, we had the license to do a lot of deep research on these trends, and we were always finding examples of things that had materialized in some small form or fashion that would indicate, this is viable now. Why isn't it being adopted? And of course, enterprises evolve slowly. Yeah. And so a lot of the forecasting that we did at PwC, we published a book called The Technology Forecast, and then it was a quarterly, and then there was just a series of blogs at the end of it. Um, but just forecasting how these things were going to be adopted. We're looking a lot at adoption, really, and what technologies were driving the adoption. So on the AI side, for example, um, just didn't have the compute networking and storage that we needed to begin with. But when that started materializing, well, machine learning just took off. And at the same time, we'd had this symbolic AI that's been around forever, and a lot of the techniques on the symbolic side have been in conventional Boolean logic programming, if then else programming, and so those two things have to come together, and that's the reason for the data worthy collective values the symbolic side of AI as well as the machine learning side. And you need to have a deterministic approach as well as a probabilistic approach to have artificial general intelligence. And so, we'd been working on personal knowledge graphs and as a discussion group, really, just trying to surface all the stuff that was out there. And again, it just goes back to my research background. We'd bring people in and they'd tell us what they're doing. Others would find out, how to do things in a different way in personal knowledge graphs. And George Anidiotis and Ivo Velichkov ended up putting together a book with Margaret Warren on personal knowledge graphs. So that sort of tied everything up in a nice package for what we had researched over the previous 2 years, and then we went on to other things, and we thought we would try to start a think tank. So that's where we are right now, um, backing hybrid AI and knowledge graphs in particular as a necessary component for AI.
Would it be fair to say that in addition to all this research, analysis, synthesis, reporting, communications around emerging trends, that you are also acting as an independent advisor for emerging technologies and how to sort of navigate the research, the conceptualization, and then how to implement it in a business or enterprise setting?
Yeah, and that goes back to my role at PwC too, because we would do this research, but then we would go into client meetings and talk about the client problems, and then it was a matter of applying the viable technology to help solve those problems. So a lot of people in enterprises might not be aware of what's in the realm of the possible, and they might not know how to prioritize what's out there, put things on a timeline. You could sequence your whole strategy based on a detailed forecast of how things are emerging, and what's going to come first and then what comes afterwards. So a lot of client discussions over the years in various verticals. I got to learn about all sorts of different industries while I was at PwC because it was just horizontal. You know, we were primarily supporting the consulting practice, and so 14 different industry verticals while I was there. And so it worked for me because I'm just sort of a big picture guy anyway. So
And you're also, I mean, you're a researcher, you're a writer, you're a public speaker, podcaster, community builder. You do so many things. I don't know how much time you have in a day. I only have 24 hours, but I'd like to learn a little bit more about your contributions to the Data Science Central. It's a publishing group, right? Or it's a
yeah,
blogging house, or what is it?
serendipitous. Data Science Central was an acquisition by Tech Target. So Tech Target is the parent company. I work with Tech Target editors on the blog post content that I develop for them. And if you know Kurt Cagle was community editor when he invited me to join and do some blogging. And it was a great opportunity because I could just basically post what I wanted to within certain parameters. And so it's been an opportunity to just really sort of riff on what I see out in the marketplace and what's emerging. And I started up a little podcast for Data Science Central. It's just a monthly, but I can do recordings like what you do, Joaquin, with industry leaders and technologists who are coming up with interesting things that need to be talked about. And it's just an adjunct to what I do on the blog side.
And that's called the fair data forecasts, right?
Yeah, because fair data, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data, that's a term that points to um, how important it is that data be reusable. And if you think about a digital twin scenario, for example, you want those twins to be interactive. You want them to scale inside an ecosystem. And in order to accomplish all of those things, really, there's a lot of work that needs to go on with data and logic at the data layer so that these interactions can happen and this interoperability can materialize. So, FAIR is all about that kind of interoperability, and it's also about what Semantic Arts calls zero copy integration. Cinci is another provider that talks about zero copy integration. You don't need this duplication anymore, and it gets in the way. So zero copy means you've got this master copy that master version that everybody uses. So you're not duplicating data, you're not duplicating logic, you're able to reuse it all. So it's very efficient by comparison with what we have now.
Throughout your long-standing career, how many projects have you seen sort of fail or go to the wayside because of their inability to take into consideration data requirements, or the use of data, the user experience of data products? What has been your experience with that?
Well, data has been an afterthought for many, many years. I think that we had the dominance of application suites in the enterprise space, starting with ERP, the likes of SAP and JD Edwards and any number of others. And each of those application suites had its own data model. And so, they were trying to impose this data model enterprise wide. I think that the learning from that experience is that, you know, y- that kind of imposition doesn't really work very well. So you've got all this underutilized software in general out there in enterprises, and people are subscribing to thousands of different services at this point, and there's not a lot of rationale or logic or efficiency in how that's being done. So, um, the solution that we're advocating is to really get your hands dirty with the data and do your own modeling. Do it simply, do it in an effective way so that you've got an upper ontology and domains that are connected to that upper ontology, and your model's going to be reusable and extensible in a graph way. And you solve that data model problem that I mentioned, but you have to do it in house. You have to do it yourself. I mean, people can help you, but it's your business. You have to model your own business.
I think you're mentioning some pretty dense words with ontologies and things like that. If it's a general audience,
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm not sure if they would be able to understand that word. But with the idea here, what I'm interpreting is there's people that see data as an afterthought because vendors or software providers have their own dogma, have their own architecture, and they want the enterprise that is paying to use their service to adopt the rigid architecture that they have. And
Hmm.
the real world doesn't really work like that, but people swallow that bitter pill because they just simply don't know any better, or they're not aware of what's out there. I mean, you made mention earlier that people live their lives in an organization, and they struggle with some common challenges that already have solutions that are reasonable and progressive and reusable, but they're just not aware. So, how do we cross that chasm? Like with the data worthy collective group, you're looking to build, you have a coalition and you're looking to educate the public on how to cross that chasm. What do we need to tell people about so that they're aware that the black boxes that they're using aren't really the most beneficial way of solving their problems?
Yeah, and it is a major challenge. I have to say, just um, things have been done this way for decades for a reason, and the reason is that it's very attractive to talk to a major software vendor, software as a service vendor, for example, and say, "Wow, they can solve my problems for me. They've got this whole platform that I can use to solve this set of problems in my enterprise." Let's say, um, uh, on the Microsoft side, Microsoft's got 11 or 12 different applications that people are using regularly inside a lot of different businesses. And what that causes is fragmentation because you're using a piece of this, Microsoft Word for one thing, Office for another, SharePoint for another, Excel. You could mention all the different Microsoft applications. How does it all come together? So basically you're duplicating effort because that is not truly integrated in the way it needs to be. And Microsoft tries to provide an integration for it, but you never get to the point where a business unit, for example, can actually make that integration work. And at the same time, you've got different vendors coming in from different directions who say they've got their solution to this problem, and then the enterprise might try to adopt their solution in addition. How do you integrate with that? So you get this huge integration tax essentially that you're always paying, and you never get to the integration. The knowledge graph approach is much more organic by comparison. You develop the data layer first with logical interconnections, and you start building small applications that are very targeted, and the applications harness a lot of the logic in the graph, so they don't have to be terribly significant in terms of size. And you're working on pieces of a problem at a time, pain points. The consultancies that work in this area, they start with an enterprise pain point, and then they expand from there. The same system can work for the majority of these problems that enterprises are facing that need to be solved with some kind of software.
This seems like such a hard to believe, but it already exists solution, right? I mean, you start with a small problem, you invest a little bit of cash, you slowly scale it out, and as you continue to scale it out, it continues to provide value. It returns value exponentially as you keep expanding the use case. You build this sort of ecosystem of knowledge that preserves the context of the data from all the different sources that you're interacting with,
Right.
sourcing, sales, marketing, internal reporting for accounting, finance, taxes, all that stuff. Um, but I think it still goes back to the education. People aren't aware what you can do. I don't think that schools or enterprises deliberately have these training programs that make people data literate. I think literacy and computer literacy are the first steps, but how do we get into the data literacy? How do we show people what fair data is? Uh,
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and I was thinking about a case study example that I often point to, which is the Montefiore Health case. And Montefiore Health is a chain of hospitals in the New York area, primarily in the Northeast, and some of the poorest parts of New York are parts that they serve. So this hospital chain hired a guy named Parsa Mirhaji years ago to set up a knowledge graph inside their organization, and it runs in parallel with the rest of the IT system. Um, they got a lot of donations to set up the initial cluster for the knowledge graph. They got donations from Intel for sophisticated memory and Cisco and others like them to set up the cluster. And so the intriguing thing about it is that you think about all the disparate kinds of data that a hospital has to use to do predictive analytics, for example. So let's say that you're a hospital, you're worried about sepsis in an ICU, in an intensive care unit, and you want to make sure that you're not overwhelmed by occurrences of sepsis. So you're keeping a handle on it. You've got intelligence about the patient, and you've got your inputs from the health records, for example. But then you need this less structured information that exists in a panoply of different academic sources, in taxonomies like SNOMED, for example. There's all this omics data. I mean, there's just you look at the challenge that a hospital like Montefiore faces. They have to bring all that together. So Parsimer Haji, he was a database guru, but he's also a cardiologist. I think he's got a PhD in computer science as well as an MD. And so he's just obsessed with databases, and he got obsessed with this knowledge graph approach. They were calling them semantic data lakes 10 years ago. So they stood up this semantic data lake in 2014, 2015. It's still running. They're doing all sorts of predictive analytics, um, enterprise wide in this hospital chain, and they stood it up on a shoestring. So it's possible with the right leadership commitment, the right people involved to set up the system the right way. They used Franz and Allegrograph, which has a very powerful semantic graph database to help them out with. And the people at Franz were very knowledgeable about guiding them on, event-driven approaches, for example, to um, bringing the data together and articulating the business processes that they had to articulate to solve the problems that they're solving. So there's predictive analytics, but at some point this system becomes so operational. It's running in parallel to the operational environment, but it could be the main gig for this hospital chain at some point, if they keep going in this direction. It's a lot depends on keeping the same personnel that had the inspiration to begin with, I guess.
That's a wonderful example. I think it still paints the picture that you need somebody to understand the value and champion both the business side and understand the technical side to get the buy-in to spend the money to do this thing. You said that the money wasn't sourced internally; it was sourced from you know outside corporations that wanted to, I don't know, maybe gain some sort of positive branding image for doing
Mm-hmm.
something beneficial for society and also advancing some R&D project. But it's interesting that you need those three elements: technical expertise, business expertise, or domain knowledge, and the cash to go and build that thing.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about the Data Worthy Collective, and who's coming in, and what kind of topics you're presenting, and where you would like to see yourself with that group.
Yeah, it's been an evolving thing. As I mentioned, we started out as a discussion group focused on personal knowledge graphs. And after that point, we decided to go more in terms of a think tank, and we're still working out how that becomes real in practice. So we have weekly meetings where they can be brainstorming sessions, but they can just be invited speakers to come in to make us aware of what's new that the group is interested in general. So it's an outgrowth of our discussion forum where we were trying to build personal knowledge graphs together and figure out the best ways to do that. We're still looking at best practices right now, and what we're trying to do is formalize an effort to build a data quality framework, because data quality is so important to AI, and it's evident that we don't have the level of data quality that we need for artificial general intelligence. The hallucinations that you hear about are really the result of the inputs being uh, not of good sufficient quality so that the outputs can be trustworthy. So the data worthy collective is all about those data inputs. And the first step, and this is something that Jessica Talisman of our group recommended, was, we have to put together a data quality framework. So you and I, Joaquin, have been looking at who's got a framework out there that might be a place to start. Not that they've got the whole shebang that we're looking for, but you want to do your due diligence and find out what's out there that we could build on top of. And so I think Peter Winstanley of Semantic Arts, so when he was with the Scottish government, he came up with some best practices that we're going to try and leverage for the World Wide Web Consortium. That's where he came up with those, and try to use those things. We've got people from the object management group in our membership. So a lot of people who are plugged into these standards that have to be used at the base layer so that you can have this level of interoperability. You have to scale this up. When you think about how AI is evolving, a lot of it is one-off projects. You've got this batch data that's being brought in to do this big thing, but you really need a flow of organic information, and it all has to be um, good quality to begin with, so the data scientists don't have to wrangle it so much, and so you sidestep the problems with the lack of trustworthiness on the output side.
This this discussion is kind of taking me to the core of the data worthy collective, and I think
Mhm.
it's the name that you want high quality data that is worthy of being used, data that it's worthy of training, and very important, highly impactful AI models and artificial intelligence systems. um, the there are a variety of people with different backgrounds, different interests. I've joined your calls. I've been part of the discussions, and I'm learning so much being part of that. But I think the unifying theme in your group, in the group at large, is the fascination with hybrid AI and ensuring that there is a unified understanding or some cohesive coherent definition of what high quality data really means.
Yeah, yeah, that's at the core of it for sure. And we're trying to raise awareness as much as anything. We feel like we're the tail wagging the dog, because we're advocating methods that might not be might not be top of mind for people who are versed in statistical kinds of machine learning, for example. So there's awareness raising that we'd like to do. Once we get the data quality framework together, there's going to be an education effort emerging where we bring people in. You need to get the youngest um, enthusiasts plugged in and aware of all these things that need to be accomplished in order to have a richer version of AI. So I think that's going to be one of our main tasks, is connecting with the larger community and um, evangelizing, making sure people know that this is a method that works and it can be scaled, like in the Montefiore case, but and it can be beneficial in ways that purely statistical methods aren't. So it's a matter of turning people's attention to the bigger picture here rather than just what say the media is currently focused on.
I'm glad you mentioned media. That's a hot word that I wanted to jump on. But yeah, I salute the efforts of the Data Worthy Collective Group, and I'm here to help however I can. I hear you. I mean, the way that the youth adopt technology and theory and learn tooling and programming languages shapes the industry as much as the labor pool. And if people only know how to use hammers and they don't know that there's electric drills or other tools, they're only going to be hitting things with a hammer. They're not going to try to drill holes or do anything else.
Right.
Um, I think it's a battle of the minds, as you said, with
Yeah.
the media, with
Yeah.
all these commercial players, all these vendor specific technologies. They have a bigger budget and a louder voice, and they can yell at more people to say, this flavor of this technology is the snake oil that's gonna uh, grow your hair back and let you, not smell so smelly. I don't know. Whatever sort of benefits, features it comes
Hmm.
with, that's the way forward. But it's also kind of the way that humans like to live in this world. That they like to adopt simple ideas, and they see things that have seemingly trustworthy authority that they can rely on, but we don't want to acknowledge that the world is a little bit more complicated. Not so complicated that it's like not manageable, but people don't want to say, let's take a step back from this marketing advertisement saying this graph database is the best. Is graph the way to solve this problem, or
Hmm.
is it a relational database,
Yeah.
or is it
Yeah.
some sort of hybrid? Do we have to replace this whole relational database that's been serving this accounting firm for 20
Yeah.
years because graph is cool and they said it in the ad? Or is there a way to merge this with a little semantics, something to augment the existing capabilities and tie it to another system? I
Yeah.
mean, there's no easy answer because there's so many different circumstances and use cases that evolve too, right?
Yeah. And let me give you an example of another one that comes to mind just based on what you're talking about here, Joaquin. Let's think about the evolution of blockchain, for example, and the notion of smart contracts and decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs. And when those first emerged after Ethereum made smart contracts possible, um, there was it's just a huge amount of buzz about DAOs. But then you started to see over the years how many data breaches there were, how much abuse of the um, the systems that were then in place materialized. And so you think back to the smart contracts. How are those smart contracts designed? You've got lawyers who have a crypto bent writing this code, but a lot of them really not versed in semantics to begin with. So you have this tunnel vision that resulted in a very kludgy way of coding, for one thing, but it also didn't really anticipate a need to model the larger environment for the DAO in a bigger way. So it was able to be hacked in so many different instances that DAOs just lost their reputation to the extent they had one. So that's another opportunity for semantic technologies that has to be thought of within the context of AI because you want these two-way contracts essentially to be in place to have autonomy in an organization. And so what we're doing couldn't be more core to blockchain as well as AI, if you get my drift.
No, I get your drift. I mean, someone comes up with a marketing hype, so someone comes up with some marketing terms. Um, People go foaming at the mouth to try to go get that thing to solve all their problems.
Yeah.
All their problems are going to go away if they buy that one thing, and then it's the period of disillusion where they get an immediate benefit, but they don't understand that there's a larger picture and how they need to integrate that into their organization, train their staff to be able to wield that technology, to be able to maintain it, to be able to extend it. Um, yeah, man. What can you do? I mean, this is the cycle of the world. This is a human nature at its core.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah. Just if just to riff a bit along those lines that you just mentioned, I think one of the things I learned at PwC is that you really have to work in the informal organization in a big place like a PwC and its clients. I mean, you got potentially hundreds of thousands of people in an organization, and there are hedgehogs that are used to doing things the way they know to do them, and then
mm,
there are the foxes, and those are the ones who are flexible and they know how to do things in different ways. So they're problem solvers in a key way. So what you do in the informal organization is you find the foxes, you align with them. They become your allies in your effort to try to transform the enterprise with new technology. And you do so in a small way. And the challenge becomes, how do you get leadership plugged in? Because leadership is used to enforcing the formal organization, and the formal organization tends to resist that kind of change. So it's an interesting social dynamic that you have to be aware of, and work in the right way to find the right people to enable this sort of change. And so the technology is there. Like I said, William Gibson said, you know, it exists, but it hasn't been adopted. The adoption requires getting the enterprise on board with it in the right way. And have successful iterations so that they can keep going in that direction rather than failing.
I think you paint a bigger picture as to the complexities of the world in an enterprise setting and how you go about gaining political support. Because at the end of the day, it's not really about solving the problem, but stroking egos, or at least making sure not to bruise them in a way that you're trying to solve real problems in the world. Um, yeah, that's a
Yeah, and the same thing applies when you're crossing organizational boundaries. One of the things that knowledge graph approach can do is it can cross these company boundaries and allow these public-private partnerships, allow supply chain level integration. You can work with people at different tiers in the partner chain, for example, and you can have that visibility in order to solve these bigger problems. And so it's like you and I are trying to engage in this new method of collaboration that does that kind of boundary crossing.
my concerns, and I'm sure we're gonna figure ways to circumvent this, lie in the people problems, not the technology problems. Because as you said, the technology exists. Find a use case, make it small enough that they could fund it with a small sum of cash, validate it, gain
Hmm.
credibility, expand, gain credibility, expand, train staff, gain credibility, expand. But there are the people problems where people are empire builders, political middle managers that hoard information to retain power and influence. They're part of the reason why some of these initiatives that are beneficial to to an organization get stamped out because they limit the power that they already wield. Why would they want to allow that to happen? Some of the
Yeah.
some of the problems of an organization are located inside of it, not in the competition, but the
Yeah.
people that are willingly hoarding information resources or not aligning themselves
Yeah.
to get a promotion or whatever.
Yeah. It's a lot of it is about finding the right people and empowering them in the right ways.
How do we find the foxes?
You start at the grassroots level,
Is there a
and
call?
you start organizing. I think that PwC, to its credit, had a lot of community of interest groups that it stood up precisely because they understood that they needed to innovate. And so the people who are most active in those communities of interest are often the curious ones who want to change. And so the challenge is getting outside of that silo and into the business units where the change has to take place. And so I think that you've got, again, you're fighting with the formal organization because you might have a cadre of people who can affect change um, potentially, but in order to make that really possible, to realize that, they really have to address what's wrong with the formal organization somehow. So I think that, again, it goes back to strategic collaboration with leadership, and leadership being open to what these communities of interest are coming up with, and you know finding the right leadership to align with, and just being philosophical about it because it's not going to work every time. I you know you're gonna find there were really good phases in organizations I was a part of, and there were really bad ones, and there was things in between. So you have varying levels of success. You just have to keep plugging away at it.
What are some pragmatic ways where people can avoid being seduced by the sirens and having them crash their ships upon the shore? And search
Yeah,
new emerging technologies or like adopting things, or chasing shiny objects. What
yeah.
what what are the ways that they can sort of guard themselves against those seductive sirens?
I, we talked about the foxes. I think another way to think about it is the system level thinkers rather than just the solution designers. So those who are aware of how the systems as a whole have to change, their minds are more synthetic. I mean, it's not just analysis that they're doing synthesis. How are things coming together? How are they going to be different? So in those alliances that you're building, you want those systems thinkers to be at the forefront, at least to begin with, so that you have a vision of how things are going to emerge in an effective way at scale. And then the piece part solutions can fit in under that system level umbrella, and you're going to discard some technologies that aren't going to be appropriate, but I think that the bottom line is empowering the right kind of people in an organization to take advantage of this, not just the technologists who might have a good idea, but various kinds of people that can help you. I just feel like organizations aren't taking advantage of different skill sets. They talk about diversity, but they're not talking about intellectual diversity, which is just as important as all the other kinds of diversity.
I'm fascinated at people that dedicate their academic and careers to organizational psychology or behavior, how smaller organizations move, medium size, large size, how they react to change, how they're proactive in investing in research and development arms. How do they manage change while maintaining a mature and stable product line to generate actual cash and dominate the marketplace as they should? Because the businesses are made to make money, not to
Mhm.
share in good faith or whatever. Like that would be a happy and welcome side effect of a business making money, but a business is there to make money for whatever solution they're providing in the marketplace. Um, yeah, I'm just thinking. I'm just kind of steeping in the foxes and hedgehogs. Hedgehogs aren't inherently bad. They bring
No, no.
stability. They bring stability to a system. They homogenize operations and tune it and make it go better, faster. Um, and
If you're building houses and you want somebody to pour concrete, you want somebody that that knows how to pour concrete, and they're going to be really fantastic. If you get to find the right hedgehogs, they're going to be fantastic at pouring the right concrete for you. They'll steer you away from all the other bad approaches. But I think the system level thinkers, to be in the mix, they want to design the house differently for your particular needs, and maybe they want to take advantage of new technologies that make the house more energy efficient,
we
and
just need the
yeah,
concrete. We just need the concrete. Get
yeah.
out of here.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of architects in our data worthy collective for a reason. They ended up there just serendipitously, but they belong there.
Let's talk about fair data. And I think one of the key things that we have to break through to make a sizable difference in the world of data is explaining and evangelizing this concept of fair data. I only heard about it 3 years ago. I'm sure people go their whole careers without having any notion of what it is or how to get it. They have notions in their head like, okay, I work in telecommunications and there's phones and this and that. I have object oriented means of programming and encapsulating logic and ideas and these data structures, but there's no notion of that fair data or domain specific language or domain modeling. These are words that are in a different space in the world. You
Yeah.
know, how do we bring that into the mainstream?
It's a great question. I would say that the first thing you want to do is to segment the kinds of data that you're collecting. And you look at the full data life cycle. First of all, you want to collect the data that you need for your organization, given its future state, not just its present state. And then you want to segment the data that you're collecting in terms of its perishability. So you don't want to the fair data that we're talking about is the more or less permanent data that's in an organization. You want, for example, a historical record, um, your business records, for example, that are comparable year to year would be an example of permanent data. But
So,
also the conceptual information that has to do with how your business runs.
accounting, reporting, that would be like core, right? Payroll. That's sort of
Well, I mean, that's one domain essentially. I think that in a pharmaceutical environment, there's an awful lot of bioscience that
mm,
doesn't change a lot, and you have to have knowledge at the molecular level and manage that knowledge so that it's retrievable when you need it for the right purposes. So fair data really originated in the pharmaceutical industry. There was a professor of pharma, in the pharma industry who came up with the term and published a paper on it. So you think about this more or less permanent data and where it resides, and which industries are at the forefront. Pharmaceuticals is probably at the top. Financial services is up there. And then there are those that are less mature because they have a lot of perishable data that they work with on a day-to-day basis. It, it's important, but it doesn't need to be handled in the same way that the permanent stuff does. So the more or less permanent stuff ends up in the knowledge graph. And then you can have your other systems like you were talking about that are traditional that are handling the more perishable stuff. I was interviewing Couchbase yesterday, VP of product and strategy. And, they're interested in, at the edge, um, being responsive to particular transactions, et cetera. So, they're more on the real-time side of things, which is not necessarily gonna be the permanent side of things, if you get my meaning.
I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
well, think of a continuum where you've got permanent data on one side.
no, no, I get that.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, perishable data, like, can we, um what's something that is expires in use? Because I think things that are kind of tangential and vain still hold some sort of model of the world and kind of help you predict or forecast other things. So what is considered to be perishable data?
Yeah, and it's a good question because, you often want that historical record.
Mhm.
Um, and so the question becomes,
Like, I bought shoes in your store, is that perishable? Like, you care about the transaction, like, you're getting 50 bucks from Joaquin in your bank account. That's a permanent record. I could see, like, that's useful. That's part of your profit and loss
yeah,
statement.
yeah.
But, do you care about the model of shoe that I bought? Do you care, like, what my age is or demographics? Do you care what I'm gonna be using it for? Is that
Yeah, yeah.
considered to be
Well,
perishable, or it depends how you
yeah,
I don't
I think that in general, you wanna model that environment that you're talking about,
mhm.
and then there's gonna be, the more permanent aspects of it that don't change. At the same time, there's gonna be things that you might not be dealing with, from a historical record basis, but it's a good question. Still working out my thinking with this, but you know, if you think about email, for example, there
Timeliness of
you,
information.
you've got I keep all my email. Should I be? Because a lot of it is just one time and it's done. It's in my calendar entries, one time and it's done. Could you make use of it? Potentially so, but from an individual's perspective, do you need to? No. Um, and you think about sensor data. Yes, you want that um, continuous analysis. You want that monitoring, but you may not want to manage it in the same way you do um, your concepts that don't change, for example, or the transactional record.
So, is the permanence and perishable relative to the use case? I guess that's the viewpoint to take, right? Like, if it's immediately useless to the compliance
Yeah.
requirements, financial requirements, marketing requirements, etcetera, whatever requirements, it's considered a nice to have, but not a must have, right?
Right, exactly. Um, and so, you have a situation where, um, you have your environment set up so that you're collecting this historical record where you need it, and you want at the same time, you've got these emerging places where you're characterizing, say, your customer base, and you want a three-dimensional view of each customer ultimately. So that stuff is important too. I'm thinking where it's less important is this sort of one-off scenario that I described before.
Mm.
Yeah.
Like a transactional scenario where there's no context or not a useful context.
Yeah, but, I think it really is a case by case basis, and we could walk through an example if it helps. I'm trying to think about, how it could, how I could articulate this better.
Well, let me take a step back from this, and
Mhm.
I just
Yeah.
wanna, we got 5 minutes on the clock. I'd love to learn more about some of the key learnings that have shaped your career from your time at PwC, looking at emerging technology. I think, there's people that are seeing, academia bleeding into industry, and we're still seeing major innovations, especially now that we've poured gasoline in the tech space with ChatGPT and things like that. Um, what have been some key learnings that help you guide and reason with developments in the commercial space with new technologies?
One of the guiding principles that I have has to do with the S curve of penetration. It's something that I learned when I was a market analyst in the chip industry. So essentially, the lesson of the S curve is that things take longer to materialize than most people think they do, and then they tend to then adoption tends to accelerate more at a more rapid clip than you might expect. So
So,
you have this flat period of the S curve where there's really not much adoption occurring at all, and that takes place for years. And it all depends on a blending of technologies that have different maturities and timelines. So one of the reasons AI has taken so long to materialize in a valid form is because it's so dependent not only on the data but on other ancillary technologies to it that have different maturities. So you think about building this S curve and you realize, okay, I need to pull this S apart a little bit because otherwise we're going to have expectations that aren't going to be realized because it takes time for this to really build before you get the hockey stick effect. So there's an awful lot of enthusiasm about emerging tech. And I think that that needs to be tempered. That needs to be moderated with a philosophy that somebody like Bill Gates espouses. He says, it takes time for these things to materialize. And so you wait for that and you target your opportunity when things are at the point where you've got sufficient maturity. So one of the reasons we're focused on knowledge graphs now is because they've had the time to mature. And a generative AI, for example, has a need for it now. So we think the timing is good to bring these things together,
mm.
and we're trying to capture the interest of people who are just going through school, for example, um, and need to know this sort of thing.
What about any patterns that you picked up in the growth of fledgling companies that are adopting these technologies and blow up to capitalize on that opportunity and those trends? Have you noticed anything with that?
Um, in terms of startups in particular,
Yeah, like
or
new organizations or research and development arms of a existing organization and how they are able to ride the wind of a trend.
yeah, well, it's places you might not expect sometimes. We interviewed some folks at the FPL in Switzerland, and they came up with a knowledge graph environment that was used worldwide by academics to share research on reverse engineering the brain. It was called the Blue Brain Nexus. So they came up with their own knowledge graph platform. They put it out there for academics to use. Here you can build your own knowledge graph and you can connect your graph to ours. And you think about current research on reverse engineering the brain. They start with mouse brains, and um, there's all this imagery about portions of the brain, slices of the brain, etc. Very, very volume intensive kinds of information. So these academics are sharing via a knowledge graph to let each other know what progress is being made that each academic needs to know about. So it's a full knowledge environment that just sprang up as a result of this one project. And the project I don't even know if it's still active or not, but it's like you guys built this thing. We really have to keep it going now because it just seemed like such a powerful large scale effort. And I think those things become possible now. So I was excited about what they've done with that. And, they're hiring ontologists still. So they're still working with the graphs. I think that going forward, you need to think about how to make this whole system organic and collaborative at a bigger scale. And so we're going to have different kinds of organizations that need to emerge to take advantage of that. I'm really more excited about the people that want to create those organizations, and they aren't necessarily venture funded. They're just trying to bootstrap things on their own.
I mean, eventually, after they reach critical mass, they get support from corporations that want to use that research potentially, right? Or enhance or invalidate hypotheses that they have on products that they want to create that may bleed into that sort of pocket of knowledge, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think, and you bring up an interesting point because you need the right people to be able to exploit that opportunity and make that possible. So again, this intellectual diversity, the skills diversity that you need to create, even in a place like an academic setting where the initial design was, we just want to share with each other. I mean, the World Wide Web was created by somebody who had that vantage point at CERN, and so here we are back in Switzerland talking about what's in the realm of the possible again.
Are there any words of wisdom, per- pearls of wisdom, whatever kind of a vehicle of wisdom that you'd like to share with people following in your footsteps, researching, following trends, trying to synthesize and rationalize with the way that the world is evolving at such a rapid pace?
Yeah, I think that you know the advice I would have is you're excited about this stuff. You want to learn all these things. You want to make sense of them, and then you want to empower them somehow. So get yourself inside these organizations and help them along so that they have a research arm so that they are empowered to do things the right way. You do your due diligence so that you don't have to restart things all over again when you run into a roadblock. So the researchers can help you stay on the right track and ferret out these opportunities that need to be really harnessed in order to make you successful. So I think research is in some ways it's highly valued. In other ways it could be more valued in the scenarios we're talking about here. So you know I I think the promising things about the collaboration environment today is that there is so much interaction going on, and so we have to shape it in the right way and bring the right people into it. So it's a huge challenge, but it's what gets me up every day, you know, just
La-
working with people in new ways.
Last question for the people that are still kind of building their identity and the confidence to be able to do that, because I'm sure that over the period of your career you've gained the confidence to be able to say, okay, these ideas are worth expressing, and it's going to save you hundreds of thousands of dollars, thousands of hours of effort that's going to end in failure because you're not aligned or you're reinventing the wheel. For the people that are still building their careers, confidence, portfolios, skills, is there anything that you can give them to encourage them to keep pushing in that direction?
Well, yeah, I think the advice that I would give is to really get your feet wet and do these things that aren't comfortable. Um, you want to get out there and expose yourself, and it can be counterintuitive, but if you're just you're not taking the chances and not trying new things and making yourself uncomfortable, then you're really not going to gain that confidence. Um, so I would just say, this is a big world. Get out into it and do what you can and push yourself. Push yourself to get into this new space, even though it may not be comfortable for you, because that's how you succeed. And I admire people who have been brave enough to take those steps early on.
Well, thank you, Alan, for sharing with us your deep earned experience and knowledge. I certainly have the takeaway that I'm going to go look for some more foxes. Uh, uh, yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's great to talk to you as always, Joaquin.